Good morning, this is Dave, and for the next half hour, I'll be reading from the Investigative Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Change is coming to Buffalo News ownership. The new boss of Buffalo's daily newspaper isn't the same old boss, but remains to be seen whether it will make any difference given the news's many challenges. Billionaire David Hoffman is buying control of Lee Enterprises, the paper's parent company. It's uncertain what that means for the news, but removing Lee's present management team is addition by subtraction. Lee's crippling debt and the worsening economics of the newspaper industry will continue to pose serious challenges, however. This article is by Jim Heaney. It can't get any worse. That's my first blush impression of the pending change in ownership and management of Lee Enterprises and the newspaper chain whose holdings include the Buffalo News. Lee bought the News and 30 other daily newspapers owned by Berkshire Hathaway in March of 2020. Lee's ownership of the News, and I suspect many other papers under its control, has been marred by top-down management and poor decision-making. Crippling debt, along with the changing economics of the newspaper industry, are at the root of Lee's problems and help explain its management of the News. Revenues company-wide have dropped over the past 5 years from $795 million to $562 million. At the same time, Lee has struggled at times to make payments on $576 million in debt accumulated to finance several expansions. This double bind has forced Lee into a constant cost-cutting mode. Of late, Lee has seen its profits vanish. It lost $35.7 million last year, and its stock price is tanking, falling from a high of $43.21 3 years ago to $4.94 at the close of the stock market on Monday. I worked at the News for 25 years during the Warren Buffett era and have kept in touch with a number of people still there since departing in 2011. The strong consensus of those left behind, Lee's corporate managers, are inept. Most of us in the newsroom would give Lee at best a D, said John Harris, a news reporter and president of the Buffalo Newspaper Guild, which represents newsroom employees. Lee has followed the playbook established by hedge fund managers who have gobbled up and strip-mined daily newspapers the past 15 years. Lee has slashed the Buffalo News newsroom from about 95 to 48 jobs, sold off the news building at Washington and Scott Streets, terminated employee pension plans, and shifted printing operations to Cleveland. The moves have saved Lee money and perhaps kept the News operating in the black, but they've come at a steep price. Print circulation has dwindled to an average of 23,792, according to the annual publisher's statement filed in June with the United States Postal Service. Digital subscriptions were 67,438. Less news coverage and a lousy website has a lot to do with it. So do aggressive price increases. Ditto for poor customer service. As a result, the paper's standing in the community has suffered. The paper's remaining staff does a respectable job for the most part and still includes some good reporters. But the News is a shell of its former self, and it doesn't help that it expends so much of its limited resources and news on whole coverage of Bills and Sabres. Lee's majority owner in waiting, the deal is expected to close in the next few months, is David Hoffman, 73, who has a net worth of $2 billion. His holdings include businesses in 30 countries and 400 locations worldwide. The Hoffman family of companies employs 17,000 in fields of agriculture, aviation, transportation, financial and professional services, hospitality and entertainment, manufacturing, marine, media and marketing, and real estate. Of note, Hoffman struck a deal last month to buy majority interest in the Pittsburgh Penguins of the National Hockey League. Of particular note, the Hoffman Media Group owns 21 small newspapers. Hoffman has pursued controlling interest in Lee for more than a year. He was initially rebuffed, but Lee executives warmed to him as the company's financial plight worsened. Lee's back was up against the wall, and I think it was looking for a way to stabilize the business, Tim Franklin, a professor and chair of local news at Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism, told the Associated Press. Here's the deal in a nutshell. For $35 million investment, Hoffman's stake in the company will grow from 10% to 52%. Another $15 million from other investors garnered a commitment from Berkshire Hathaway to reduce the interest payments due on $446 million of remaining debt from 9 to 5%, which will save an estimated $18 million a year. The debt stems from Berkshire Hathaway's holding the note on Lee's purchase of its 31 daily newspapers, 49 weeklies, and 32 specialty publications in 2020, and loaning it an additional funds to cover previous debts that were coming due. Hoffman is expected to assume chairmanship of Lee once the deal goes through. Kevin Mowbray, the company's president and CEO, has already retired, and Chief Financial Officer Tim Millage is departing the end of February. More house cleaning is expected once Hoffman formally takes over. Hoffman isn't saying much publicly, and when he has spoken, it's mostly been to publications in his native Missouri, where his business activities haven't always panned out. He now lives in Naples, Florida. Last April, he told the St. Louis Business Journal that Lee's largest newspapers are the least attractive part of Lee's portfolio. That would presumably include the News, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and the Omaha World Herald. Large papers, Hoffman said, are more complex, and there are more things to deal with than there are in local markets. St. Louis Magazine, in a piece published last week, had this to say about Hoffman's track record as a publisher. Hoffman, it said, prefers local control, and that would be good for the News, which operated independently when Buffalo owned the paper. Claims to have never downsized the staffs of the newspapers he bought. That sets him apart from just about every major newspaper operator in the United States, save the New York Times. While professing a soft spot for print, believes digital is the future, including paywalls, that prevailing wisdom is the newspaper industry. Is big on high school sports. This is a relative strong suit of the News. The New York Times, in an October 24th profile, quoted Jay Passangatis, the media group's chief executive, as saying the game plan would be for Lee would involve investing in journalism to build a more substantial digital subscription business. You put journalists back into city council meetings. You put journalists back out at sports games for the local communities, Gaddis told the News. You have local management again in these newspapers, which has all been stripped out. This all sounds good, but keep in mind, Hoffman is a relative newcomer to the newspaper business, and his holdings are small publications. It's one thing to turn a profit at, say, the Mackinac Island Town Crier or the Telluride Times, and another to successfully manage the likes of the Buffalo News or St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Harris of the Buffalo News Guild is taking a wait-and-see approach. We're not sure what it means quite yet, though we're optimistic about the infusion of money and the lowering of interest rate from Berkshire. I just hope he chooses a good CEO to help lead Lee. Hoffman's wealth can make a difference, but billionaires have a mixed track record as newspaper publishers. The Washington Post has taken a wrong turn of late under Jeff Bezos, and Patrick Soon-Shiong's stewardship of the Los Angeles Times has been problematic. There have been some successes. The Minnesota Star Tribune and Boston Globe comes to mind. The Poynter Institute, in a December 2024 piece, said a common denominator of successful billionaire publishers is hiring the best available talent for publisher and editor, then letting those professionals do their jobs with only the lightest of oversight. A special election set for Ryan's Senate seat. Democrat Jeremy Zellner is expected to face Republican businessman Dan Gagliardo on February 3rd. The real fireworks will come in the June Democratic primary when Assemblymember John Rivera enters the mix. This is by Jeff Kelly on Political Post. The special election to fill the 61st District State Senate seat vacated last week by Sean Ryan before he was sworn in as Buffalo mayor is coming as quickly as state law allows. Governor Kathy Hochul last Friday set the date for February 3rd. She could have picked a date as late as the first Tuesday in March, but instead chose the first possible Tuesday allowed under the law, just over a month after Ryan resigned the seat. The move favors the four political parties with automatic ballot access in a special election process that already privileges major party insiders by minimizing the time allotted to independent candidates who might want to petition their way onto the ballot. Paul Wolf, an advocate for election reforms, called the process fundamentally undemocratic because the power it confers on party bosses to determine the candidates. The governor's decision to call the special election quickly just makes matters worse, he said. This compressed timeline makes it nearly impossible for voters to learn about the candidates or for any grassroots organizing to occur. Here's how the special election works. Leadership of the four parties with automatic ballot slots, Democrats, Republicans, Conservatives, and working families, must designate their candidates for the seat by Friday. Those candidates have until Monday to accept the ballot lines. The Erie County Democratic Committee on Wednesday evening is expected to nominate its chair, Jeremy Zellner. The Erie County Republican Committee has already chosen Amherst businessman Dan Gagliardo, who in November lost his bid for Amherst Town Supervisor. The working families and conservative parties will likely line up behind two candidates or sit out the race. A candidate who wants to run on an independent ballot line next month has until Monday to collect and submit 1,000 valid signatures from voters in the district. The first day to collect signatures was last Friday. That would be a heavy lift in good weather, let alone in the dead of winter. So Zellner and Gagliardo likely will be the only choices on the ballot. The winner will serve out the remainder of Ryan's term, which ends December 31st. Candidates for a full 2-year term must run in June's primary, assuming they face a challenger from their own party, and then November's general election. Enter 149th District Assembly member Jonathan Rivera. The Buffalo Democrat declared his candidacy for the 61st District Senate seat even before Ryan won the mayor's race in November. He intends to enter the Democratic primary in June, regardless of next month's outcome. Rivera said the special election would likely turn out relatively few voters, and the designation process tunes out the voices of district residents. There's a reason why Democrats feel disengaged across this country, and it's because they're often fed candidates that they never even wanted, and they're not given options, Rivera said. The primary is going to do that for them. That's the real electorate that's going to make this decision. Rivera has long been tight with Ryan. He comes from the West Side coalition of Democrats associated with his father, Niagara District Council member David Rivera, as well as Ryan, former Assembly member Sam Hoyt, and Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz. He succeeded Ryan in the Assembly when Ryan was elected to the Senate in 2020. He was active in Ryan's mayoral campaign. Jonathan Rivera also has been an ally of Zellner. He's put in time working on numerous campaigns for fellow Democrats. He worked jobs in Poloncarz's office and in the county's Department of Public Works, of the sort that are parceled out to loyal and effective party operatives. Rivera and Zellner began jockeying for position well before Ryan won the Democratic Party for mayor last June. Neither is especially well known in the district. Zellner's name is familiar mostly to party insiders and political junkies. Rivera's assembly district overlaps parts of the Senate district in the city, but then stretches south along the lake to Hamburg, where the Senate district runs north of Buffalo into the city of Tonawanda, the towns of Amherst, Grand Island, and Tonawanda, and the villages of Kenmore and Williamsville. Zellner spent last summer and fall lining up support for Democratic Party leaders in the towns and villages that make up the bulk of the district. He said he has recused himself from his party's choice of special election candidates, which he described as more open and transparent and democratic than that of any other party. More than 80 party leaders will take part in tonight's vote, he said. And yes, I've called every one of them and asked for their support, and I feel very good about it. I've had a lot of encouragement to make this run from within the district from day one. Rivera, meanwhile, has secured a long list of endorsement from labor unions, about a dozen so far, he said. He said labor supports him in part because he's learned the ins and outs of Albany during his 5 years in the Assembly. I'm the only candidate in the race that has the experience, that knows what the job is. Zellner countered that he's lived in the district my whole life. I know it like the back of my hand. He said he's knocked on the doors of more than 800 Democrats already and received a strong positive response to his candidacy. I've had a lot of encouragement from folks in this district to do this, Zellner said. Not people from New York City, not people from Albany, but people from this 61st district. Zellner and Rivera present a united front on one issue. Both argue the district needs a Democrat in Albany to fight against the Trump administration's cuts to Medicaid and other safety net programs. Gagliardo, the Amherst Republican, faces an uphill battle next month and in November's general election should he choose to run in both. At last count, there were about 93,000 registered Democrats in the district compared to about 50,000 Republicans. Close to 11,000 voters were registered with the conservative, working families, and other minor parties. More than 49,000 registered voters in the district have no party affiliation. Gagliardo said his race for town supervisor raised his profile in the district and gave him a lot of insight into issues important to voters. We've already done all this work, he said, and we switched a lot of people, a lot of Democrats, a lot of blanks. They voted for me because they believe the things I was saying. Gagliardo characterized the special election as a contest between a working man and an entrenched political boss. As for the June Democratic primary, on the face of it, the demographics favor Zellner, a city of Tonawanda native. About 3/4 of the district's registered Democrats live outside of Buffalo. The towns of Amherst and Tonawanda, where party leaders have lined up behind Zellner's candidacy, account for nearly 2/3 of Democratic voters. Some of Zellner's supporters have suggested the district would be better represented by a suburban Democrat rather than a city dweller like Rivera. Rivera called that argument divisive. He noted that Ryan, a white man from Buffalo, represented the district for 5 years. Poloncarz, a white man from the city, represents the entire county. Tim Kennedy, yet another white man from Buffalo, represents a congressional district that runs the gamut from city to farm country. As of November, Zellner has about $357,000 in the campaign committee he has used to run for party chair. He can redirect most of that money to his Senate campaign. He said he also expects to qualify for public matching funds, which would require at least 150 additional individual contributions between $5 and $250 from voters within the district. Rivera in July reported shy of $22,000 in the bank. He's been fundraising for the past 6 months, however, and hopes to qualify for public matching funds too in order to level the playing field with Zellner. Between organized labor and public campaign financing, I feel good, Rivera said. Gagliardo all but emptied the account he used to run for Amherst Town Supervisor in the fall, reporting just $1,700 in the bank at the end of November. But he has the personal resources to self-fund a month-long special election campaign. At least so far, has no fellow Republicans trying to tap the same donor pool should he decide to run in the general election as well. He said he, too, expects to qualify for public matching funds. So far, only Rivera, Zellner, and Gagliardo have registered campaign committees with the state election boards. All 3 declared candidates must file campaign finance disclosures on January 15th. Special election candidates must make another round of disclosures on January 23rd, 11 days before the election. The stamp data center could jack up power bills. The amount of electricity the data center would use could power 400,000 homes, nearly enough for every house in Erie County. As a result, power bills could rise, and the project is likely to win huge subsidies. A national builder is once again proposing to construct a massive data center at Genesee County's Stamp Industrial Park, one that would use so much electricity that it could drive up costs for residential and commercial customers. The data center's power demands could also hamstring efforts to recruit other businesses to the industrial park, which has struggled to attract tenants despite the investment by the state of $100 million. A proposal filed with Genesee County officials on Friday from Stream Data Centers for a 2.2 million square foot facility states it would require some 500 megawatts of electricity, 83% of all power that would be available at Stamp. The amount of electricity could power nearly every home in Erie County, which has 411,500 households, according to the most recent U.S. Census data. It could power nearly every home in Monroe, Genesee, Livingston, Orleans, and Wyoming counties combined. That's Rochester, its suburbs, and 4 surrounding counties. 400,700 total households. Critics and environmental advocates worry a data center drawing so much power could drive up energy costs for New Yorkers by an undetermined amount. Researchers have found that data centers elsewhere in the country are contributing to a rise in electricity costs for consumers. Electricity rates in New York State are already higher than the national average. A November analysis showed power bills in the state ranked 17th highest in the nation. The developer said in its application the data center would be leased to a Fortune 50 company whose ranks would include tech giants like Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft. While Stream Data Centers has not yet requested public subsidies, government assistance could tally hundreds of millions of dollars in the form of discounted hydropower and property and sales tax exemptions. The project is slated to create 120 jobs, 2 fewer than Stream's previous proposal. We shouldn't just take the lowest hanging fruit that comes our way. We can afford to be a little picky in what we're putting our tax dollars toward, said Bridge Rock, an environmental justice organizer with the Buffalo-based Clean Air Coalition, which has advocated against other data centers in the region. If they want to build them, they should pay the full cost of that project. Meanwhile, members of the Tonawanda Seneca Nation, whose territory abuts Stamp, fear the data center would harm old-growth forest they rely on for medicinal plants, hunting, primarily due to 24/7 lights, and noise emitting from the facility. The nation also fears that stormwater runoff from Stream's property could harm creeks that run through its land. Tonawanda Senecans earlier this year sued Stream Data Centers and the Genesee County Economic Development Center, the local industrial development agency building Stamp, for failing to conduct a proper environmental review of a past data center proposal. Stream canceled that project, making the lawsuit moot and handing the nation a victory, but vowed to return. Part of my outrage comes from the fact that the presence of a data center at Stamp has been so forcefully rejected by not only the Tonawanda Seneca Nation, but also local residents, said Sarah Howard, an organizer with the group Allies of the Tonawanda Seneca Nation. To come back with this more than a twice as large and much more energy-intensive facility is really disrespectful to the local voices. In statements to Investigative Post, Mark Massey, President and CEO of Genesee County Economic Development Center, his agency is evaluating the proposal from Stream Data, saying that any land sales or financial incentives will be publicly considered at a later date. A spokesman for Stream Data did not return a request for comment. Earlier this year, Stream Data proposed a $6.32 billion, 900,000 square foot data center at Stamp that would have used 250 megawatts of power, 10,000 gallons of water per day, and employ 122. In March, the Genesee County Economic Development Center awarded the project a $472 million subsidy package. The newest proposal is nearly 2.5 times larger at 2.2 million square feet, or 38 football fields. The data center would use 500 megawatts of power, 20,000 gallons of water per day, and employ 120. The proposal comes as the IDA has struggled to fill the 1,250-acre industrial park in the town of Alabama, 13 miles northwest of Batavia, despite some 15 years of planning and $100 million in state grants. Only two companies, Plug Power and Edwards Vacuum, have committed to the mega site through Plug Power, struggling financially. Recent data recently canceled its plans. A portion of the data campus center would be built on land previously committed to Plug Power. The IDA could earn more than $100 million in fees from the proposed data center. The IDA is constructing a 600 megawatt substation to provide electricity to Stamp tenants. Initially, Plug Power was going to cover the cost, but with the company's plans scuttled, the IDA was given permission by the state to redirect a $56 million grant to pay for the work. The IDA began entertaining data center firms last year in a bid to finish the substation and recruit the state grant money. Should the 500 megawatt data center come to life, Stamp will be left with about 93 megawatts of power to offer future tenants. The availability of hundreds of megawatts of power was a gold mine for the industrial park, despite its remote location, site selectors previously told the Investigative Post. Massey of the IDA said in a statement that 93 megawatts was plenty to market to other firms. The agency said we'll be able to continue to market low-cost power in our ongoing efforts to bring more companies to Stamp. The data center is already facing vehement opposition from the Tonawanda Seneca Nation and the surrounding communities. Dozens spoke out against Stream's first proposal in February. In a December letter, a group of more than 600 members of various advocacy groups wrote to leadership of Stream opposing the project. Data centers nation spokesman Grandel Logan said, are noisy. That's the big thing. This one is larger. Animals are sensitive to it, and we're sensitive to it as well. The land, he added, needs to be protected. It needs to be respected by people off territory as well. At Stamp, electricity would come from a
Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and